isn't good enough because the entirety of that amendment needs to be taken this afternoon, because what that amendment does is makes absolutely clear that there will be no shale gas exploration or extraction until those conditions are in place. It's not a pick list for her to decide which ones she likes and which ones she doesn't. It's to ensure that in legislation it's absolutely clear that those protections are in place. If that is indeed the government's case now, it proves that during the course of the committee and discussions, and previously and before and leading up to those discussions, that actually all of the contribution from the Minister and others, that they thought that the regulatory process was absolutely coherent, was correct and was comprehensive, have been demonstrated this afternoon to be entirely false. And I think that underlines the importance of us taking a responsible attitude to these issues and to making sure that those issues are properly covered, as I said, which have been reflected by very many others who have tabled amendments to this bill, including members of her own party. There are a number of other amendments which have been tabled by other honourable members. And I just have to say, in relation to the DEFRA report, I'm very disappointed in the Minister's response to that. It's so redacted that it seems that it was written by somebody called Redacted. It doesn't meet the concerns of the member, the chair of the select committee, from a sedentary position. His contribution so far in total to this debate from the Energy Minister suggested that that wasn't the case. I have the report in front of me, Shale Gas Rural Economy Impacts by Redacted. That's how ridiculously redacted this report has become, and how little confidence we can have that the government seeks not to publish that report and to enable members of this House to look at those cumulative impacts. There are a number of amendments the member for Thirsk and Moreton has tabled on that, on mandatory EIAs, on issues around substances, all of which I agree with and we agree with, and we think there are amendments, again, which the Minister should properly consider, as we do with the amendments in relation to water companies and the statutory footing for community benefits tabled by the member for Arundel and South Downs and others. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is a controversial subject. There is much interest in it outside as well as inside the chamber this afternoon. It's one aspect of a bill which contains many, many measures, some of which are supported and some of which are not. It's absolutely the role of government to not only address those concerns, but to take on board the range of issues we have already heard and will continue to hear for the next half an hour. Not from one party, but from probably every party represented here this afternoon. The focus this afternoon in this House and for the government is to listen to Parliament, to respond to the concerns, to reflect upon those, and ensure that no fracking will happen until the wider confidence there needs to be applied in the regulatory framework, not partially, not with exception, not with some but not others, not in full, but completely and comprehensively is in place. For those reasons, I implore the government to accept new Clause 19 in full, to not seek to cherry-pick the clauses, sub-clauses within new Clause 19, and if they aren't clear about that and fail to do so, then we will indeed seek to divide the House on new Clause 19 and other of our amendments subsequently this afternoon.
We'll end up with an industry that has not been properly regulated because of these failures for overall strategic assessments. Now, I'd
like to endorse the comments of the Honourable Lady. I'm now on to my fourth and fifth shale gas application in my constituency. And at second reading, I made it very clear to the government what I wanted to see was an overarching body that looked at end-to-end regulation, start to finish, just as the Honourable Lady is envisaging. And it's still not out of time yet for the government to relinquish on something like that.
Well, I think as we heard from the Minister just now, there might well be time for further amendments, because we clearly haven't got the amendments that we need to be looking at right now. And when those further amendments come forward, I think it's absolutely imperative that the government looks at that long-term issue, make sure, for example, that whatever a local planning authority is going to rule on, that's not going to be overturned by the Secretary of State. And that's the real danger that there is. I think also for something that is as controversial as this particular issue is, and this bill is, it makes no sense for there to have been consultation with people saying that they don't want these proposals coming forward in this way. It's an absolutely toxic recipe for the government to be bringing forward.
Point of order, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Lady has referred to the potential for further amendments coming forward, and I know we've had an iterative process, to put it mildly, here this afternoon. But even I didn't think that there would be scope for the government to bring forward further amendments in this House. So would the Deputy Speaker rule on that issue and clarify the matter as to whether the Minister is actually making a statement correctly or incorrectly?
Just to help the situation, it would be a possibility for the Lords to look at that and do something about the bill at that stage. Joe Morley.
Well, I'm interested in that point of order because I think what it does is just set out for us the situation that we're in. We're going to be voting today in this House on something that isn't there in front of us in the hope that the concerns that we don't have time to raise can then be taken forward by amendment in the other place. And that is just not the right way to be making good legislation. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm just conscious that so many people wish to speak on this. I think that there should be a moratorium. I think that the government have overlooked the needs of people all over the country, and without that public support, this particular policy in this House going all out for fracking is just a failed policy.
Dr. Julian Hepburn.
Deputy Speaker, and I'll try to be brief, but it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady, and I pay tribute to her for her work on this issue and her call for the moratorium, which I do agree with. We do have a problem that we use far too many fossil fuels, and despite the fact that we know the harm that climate change is causing and is going to continue to cause, we still see a thirst to have more and more and more of those. And the solution has to look different. Maybe in the future will be nuclear fusion, who knows? We're 25 years away from that, as we have been for about 50 years. What we have to get to is renewables and other low-carbon energy sources and energy efficiency so that we use less energy, whether it's for heating, whether it's for transport, or for anything. I'll give away only the once. And
does he share my concern that there's no obligation to make sure renewables are considered as part of large major infrastructure projects?
Indeed, what we should be seeing is a quest for more renewables, and one of my concerns about the dash for fracking, the dash for gas, is that it can be a substitute for some purposes for a dash for renewables with other low-carbon technologies, which is where we have to get to. And that's what worries me about this. And when we know, from study after study, of the huge amounts of fossil fuels that we have to leave in the earth, because we simply cannot afford the harm that would come from burning them, why go to a mass effort to legislate to say that we have to take as many as possible out of the ground? That is not the right way to go. It is the carbon emissions, whether carbon dioxide or methane, that cause me the biggest problems with shale gas and with fracking. And it is very interesting to look at the scientific evidence of how this compares to LNG. And there was a comment made about Dave Mackay, my constituent, and the range. Actually, what he found was the range of carbon emissions from shale gas overlap with the range of emissions from liquid natural gas. There is no guarantee that we will actually see a reduction as a result. So I will not give way, because there are many people who would like to speak.